What's up, everybody? Welcome in, and thank you for listening to Hail Yes, a Detroit Free Press podcast about the University of Michigan athletics. My name's Tony Garcia, Michigan beat writer for The Free, joined as always by our Big Ten insider, Reiner Sabin. However, it's a new Reiner Sabin, a rejuvenated Reiner Sabin, might I say. You look like you have extra color in your skin, refreshed, no MSU, and no travel to Minneapolis this weekend for Reiner. You got to, not that you aren't one of our hardest workers, always locked in. I know you tuned into the Michigan game, and we have tons and tons to dive into. But were you able to enjoy a Saturday in October, at least a little bit of it?
Well, I was at a wedding in
there we go,
northern Michigan, so it was okay. I missed a lot of college football actually, which was kind of devastating in a large way. But yeah, no, it was okay. We had to race back home so I could get in front of my television to watch the Michigan-Minnesota game. I almost fell asleep. I was exhausted too, and I almost fell asleep in the game. So.
And I got to imagine that makes the wedding tougher because I'm sure you were not inebriated covering the game. So now you're having conversations you don't care to be sober for, probably fully. We're locked into it.
It wasn't that kind of wedding. There was no open bar or anything like that.
Oh,
so it was a pretty tame event. So the reception was nice, but tame.
See, I peg you as just a wild wedding animal. That's when the gloves come off and when Reiner lets loose. Oh God, that'll be a great time whenever we attend our first wedding together. I don't know how we've gotten here, but maybe we've gotten here because Michigan is so impressive and so dominant, and just thoroughly manhandled Minnesota 52-10. In every which way, to the point where we in our pre-show meeting are talking about weddings and Big 12 championship tiebreakers and all sorts of things, right? That is not Michigan, because I mean, just another great performance. So here's a little quick look ahead at what this show will look like. Our three thoughts: is this Jim Harbaugh's best defense at Michigan? And then, I mean, just. There's a few levels to that sort of, and just how the players, the talent has grown. Then part two, now at full health, Michigan's really got some playmakers everywhere, which we knew, but this was the first time they were all on the field together. And then we parlay that into what PJ Fleck said, Minnesota's head coach, about just with some very high praise for Jim Harbaugh's team. And then after the break, Reiner didn't get to see as much college football as normal, but I mean, I know he was still watching. We were, as was I. I actually like the night slate. Well, I don't like the night slate. Noon is always a preference. However, the silver lining to the night slate, correct me if I'm wrong, Reiner, is how much football we get to watch. All the noons and most of the 3:30s. Right, you're doing a little bit of pregame stuff, but you can actually lock into those 3:30s pretty good too.
Yeah, that's true. The worst time slot if you're a reporter is 3:30. It's just, or the 5 o'clock Peacock that they did for Michigan State, Washington. That was just peculiar and really ruined everything for me as far as being able to follow the days of coverage and everything. So yeah, it's preferable for either noon or 7:30. But yeah, 7:30 is good for if you want to watch a pretty steady diet of college football.
Yeah, and we'll get into that on the other side of and some of the circus acts that we saw and the impressive performances across the country. But no performance was more dominant, suffocating, what have you, maybe in the country, than what Michigan did to Minnesota, 52-10 yesterday at Huntington Bank Stadium. And Reiner, sure, we can talk about Minnesota not having a great quarterback. Yes, they were without the Big Ten's leading rusher, Detroit native Darius Taylor, and all those sorts of things. But for me, this was more about the defense making the defense made a real statement for me. Where are you on, is this Jim Harbaugh's best defense?
Yeah, I do think it's Jim Harbaugh's best defense, because not only did they in year 3 of the current scheme, the kind of multiple scheme that they adopted from the Baltimore Ravens. So they have a sound base. Everybody knows what their kind of their responsibilities and where they're supposed to be and how they should react, to the various plays that they face. And then you combine that with the fact that they've got, some playmakers now, and they're making plays on the ball. Like the first couple of years, the defense was benefiting from the offense and the way that they milked the clock. So they were on the field for less time, and they were able to kind of pin their ears back in certain situations and go after them. But sometimes now you're seeing the defense actually take the initiative and be the driving force for the offense. I mean, case in point, this second series, or the first series for Nebraska last week, where they got a tipped interception that led to the second score for Michigan to create 14-0 and basically put Michigan in position to rout Nebraska. This week, you saw a second play of the game. Again, this was Michigan taking a pick six with Will Johnson returning it for a touchdown, and it was lights out from there. So this defense is setting the tone and making plays and doing things that they weren't doing even the first 2 years in the system. And I have to think it's because, again, the players are so much more comfortable in understanding exactly where they're supposed to be and how it's supposed to work. And it's kind of just a cumulative process that has led to this point.
Cumulative, certainly. It's the evolution, right? It is just right. How, not only do the players have a better understanding of as you said, whether it's Mike McDonald, now Jesse Minter, of sort of the concepts, the schemes that they're trying to implement, and I want to go into that just for one more second, because it's so easy to say, right? Like the understanding of a system, right? And knowing what you're doing and being in the right spots. That's one thing when you run just sort of, a normal defense, a 4-3 defense, or like just like a base, simple, common defense, 3-4, 4-3, whatever. It is Michigan is running, as you said, an NFL scheme at the collegiate level with this, they've called it the amoeba defense. It's very multiple in their fronts. As you just said, they can go anywhere. 3, the base is 4 down linemen, but they can go 3 or they can go 5. And that was the switch they made yesterday, right? At the half, when Minnesota is making a little bit of headway on the ground, 20 rushes for 70 yards at the half. They go back in at the lock or at the break, and Jim Harbaugh, I thought it was interesting. He said he actually wanted to make sure he spent some time with the defense instead of the offensive side, just to hear the adjustments Jesse Minter was making. And what they did was put an extra defensive lineman on the field, put him out wide outside the tackle. It's called a 6 technique, and that way your job is solely to set the edge, because Minnesota was running a bunch of stretch plays, right? So you run horizontally, and then you wait and you let the gap sort of open up, and then you hit the hole and you pick one, A, B, C, what have you. Often it was C yesterday, sort of between that guard and tackle. Michigan made the adjustments in the third quarter. Minnesota ran 8 times for 7 yards. So it's that understanding of what you're being asked to do and being able to shift in real time, on top of the fact that you said guys like Will Johnson, just straight dudes making plays.
Well, and it's a fusion of good coaching and really good talent that's happening right now. But even on that, the pick 6, again, they're in zone coverage. Makari Page basically is leveraging him to throw the ball into that window, and there's Will Johnson ready to make that play. Again, it's defense is all about leverage and leveraging the ball into the right position. That's what Nick Saban likes to do at Alabama. Basically getting that ball to exactly where they want, the weak spot, or the strong point of the defense and the weak spot for the offense. And that's what Michigan is doing now. And it's pretty evident that it's having a huge impact on their ability to make plays now. And again, it's also that you're seeing, again, the more of the shift. When they first implemented this defense, they were incorporating more man and coverage, because that's what Don Brown and you're seeing a slow gradual evolution to more zone. They're almost playing exclusively zone at times. And in that kind of defense, that leads to more turnovers usually because, your eyes are facing the quarterback. And so you're starting to see that where, again, Keon Sabb is reading Kalkamenis' eyes and just picks him off right there and just steps into a lane with a. Yeah, exactly. And then it's lights out again for Michigan or for Minnesota. So I mean, it's a very interesting defense to watch, and it's interesting to see how it's evolved, in the last 3 years.
And when you look at it, it looks like this defense isn't going anywhere. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like so what I wrote yesterday, because it's hard to keep. And it's what I asked the players afterwards. What I asked Jim afterwards. I mean, and I thought, because Jim said these games are won on Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday, right? And the players are saying, there's always something to get better at. Because what we're asking is, how do you learn anything when you're just beating the snot out of teams week in, week out, pounding? How do you not get a big head? What can you learn? And Michigan. Now, what they have learned is that they can overwhelm opponents, and they are doing that now that they're at full strength. And it's not that they didn't know that, but they were already dominating, holding opponents to 7, 6, 3, 7, what have you. But Will Johnson and Mason Graham had never been on the field together at the same time. Who do you think Pro Football Focus's top 2 graded defenders were for Michigan yesterday? It was those two. 28 snaps for Mason Graham and 44 for Will Johnson. And those guys are sophomores. You know what I mean? And Keon Sapp, another young guy, Ernest Hausman, Kenneth Grant, Derek Moore. These are all guys who make plays, serious playmakers who are just sophomores, and some in their first year, like Ernest Hausman, in the first year in the system, right? Not that Hausman had a big game yesterday, but just something like that, helping the depth of this linebacker room, right? So Junior Colson and Mike Bear are not constantly on the field. Michigan's not even putting any touches on there. They are so deep. They're not even putting any. It's how they're getting healthy. It's all working together, right? They are so deep. They can limit the touches, limit the bumps, limit the bruises. Blake Corum ran the ball 9 times yesterday. 9 times. He had, and he still is getting a touchdown. He still has the most rushing yards on the team in the offense. And it's just ho hum. JJ McCarthy hasn't played in a fourth quarter, like a serious fourth quarter, other than Rutgers. He was in like midway through. I mean, it's all working together.
It is, and I think that's part of. I mean, if you've noticed on the you didn't notice because you weren't watching the game via broadcast, but on the broadcast they kept on mentioning the selflessness. That's a thing that Jim Harbaugh is trying to push to the team, or it was clear that was something he wanted to emphasize during his press conference on last Monday. Basically, because he has to get these guys touches and keep everyone happy, and it's tough, and so. Especially if you're a star player, you might want more touches. But I mean, he's trying to sell this whole holistic team or a complete team or a deep team, and he's trying to make sure that everybody kind of stays content with that. And I think that's something he's really trying to emphasize and trying to impart on the team. The stats will come at some point, but for now, we need to emphasize this depth because you never know when. Some of these players are going to have to, step to the fore and help us out at some point. So I think that's a message that he's really trying to get across to the team, and they're trying to emphasize it in different ways. Yeah,
we've seen it already, right? I mean, the offensive line, Darius Henderson is now the starter at left tackle, and Miles Hinton has gone from right tackle to now depth. Trente Jones, who started 5 years, and has moved in and out. He's never started this year, but he is depth on the line. And those tackle positions as they continue to move things around. I mean, think about the snaps that Samaj Morgan and Frederick Moore are getting at wide receiver. Darius Clemens is getting on the field now more that he's back to health. Of course, they have Roman Wilson and Cornelius Johnson. Kalel Mullings has fully carved out a role in the backfield. He is the short yardage back. He is the complement to Blake Corum, and Donovan Edwards is now a running back who is really the passing down back. That's really how this has evolved, right? And I mean, even if you look on the other side of the defense, they talk about the rally group on the defensive line, or Keon Sabb with a pick yesterday. I mean, he gets his first start of his career, I believe. I need to go back and look against East Carolina, or maybe it was UNLV. I mean, he's getting a lot of reps early because Rod Moore is out, because Makari Page is out, and now look what's happening.
Yeah, it's true, and it's weird. And again, I think Jim Harbaugh is wrestling with this because I think there's almost, in some ways, it's a great problem to have, but there's almost too much depth, and so he's trying to keep everybody kind of engaged and do this. But at the same token, I mean, he's got some star level players that he's kind of got to give more run to than others, and so I think he's trying to find that balance, which is why he's emphasizing this selflessness, and like he's trying to get that message across. Like he was talking about the law of gravity, and hoping that personal jealousies don't infect you, and people are remain satisfied and understand the bigger picture. And I think that's something he's wrestling with right now.
Certainly, that's a great point. Mm-hmm. But obviously we're just on the outside, but it looks like they're doing a pretty darn good job.
Yeah, I think so.
Balancing it, right? I mean, who's unhappy? Who on this team is I think they traveled with 75 guys, 74 playing.
Right.
Everyone is playing.
Right.
And that doesn't happen. I mean, that number is usually in the 30s or 40s, right? Like maybe, I guess if you're counting special team, maybe 50, right? Like all it's probably not in the 30s. It's in the 40s, maybe 50, 52 guys seeing the field. A third of the people who you travel with are not playing.
No, I think he's, again, there's probably across the board. The question is like, your star level players, are they getting enough run? I mean, there's players that came back. They're looking to, make their name, or not make their name, but like basically achieve these, some of these personal achievements. I mean, I think that's natural. Any person is going to want to achieve the most that they possibly can. So like, somebody like Horms probably is going to want to get some more carries. Remember, he never has said that, I want to have my carries limited. It's basically like, give me the ball as much as you want to. I mean, I'll definitely carry it as many times. And so it's trying to kind of keep the star players satisfied, in addition to, again, building this depth and having these options available when you do need them. And so I think that's the tricky balance that Jim Harbaugh is trying to find. And I think that's why he's emphasized that in the last week or so.
It's true. And we can keep hammering it home, but I want to get on to sort of the next point about some of these players, about these star players who came back, who made the decision to get more touches. This is why Michigan is winning games 52-10. Like sometimes it can be that simple. Like I look up yesterday, and 5-star Will Johnson is scoring a touchdown. And then when he's done, 5-star JJ McCarthy is running one in on the left side and then running one in on the left side. Or excuse me, on the right side. And then when he's not doing it, Blake Corum, perhaps the most decorated running back in the program in 2 decades since his coach, is pounding it in up the middle. And then, by the way, we're going to just throw it over the top to Colston Loveland, who is maybe the second most talented tight end in America, but in terms of pass catcher, behind Brock Bowers. So it's like, not only is Michigan well coached and understand, and not only is Michigan disciplined and well coached and and not selfish, right? Like selfless that's the word we're looking for. But they're extremely talented. They're more talented than I think you could say they've ever been. Mason Graham, Will Johnson. It's to borrow a phrase from the program, the other in-state program, Michigan State. It is relentless. Michigan is relentless.
Yeah, I mean, they've got, again, a talent across the board. I mean, Jim Harbaugh talked before the season that he thought this was the most talented roster he had, top to bottom, and especially at key positions. I mean, they've got some real impressive players. I mean, J.J. McCarthy, a quarterback. I mean, it's definitely the best quarterback that Jim Harbaugh's had since he's been here. Blake Corum is the best running back he's had since he's been here. Roman Wilson is a good receiver. I don't know if he's the best receiver that they've had. They've had some pretty good ones. Nico Collins being one of them, and but I mean, as far as college level players, yes, I mean you can make an argument that he's one of the best receivers that Jim Harbaugh has had since he's been here. Mason Graham, probably the best kind of run stopper, invasive defensive tackle that he's had, along with, Mozzie Smith has been obviously a very good run stopper, but Mason Graham, I think, has a little bit more oomph when it comes to like the pass rush, and then say Mozzie Smith. So he's right up there. Will Johnson may be one of the most talented corners they say, although he's had Jordan Lewis and he's had really good defensive back since he's been here. I mean, that's one position that Michigan has really developed. The DJ Turner, I mean, just who left the program, and then Sandra Still, who's been quite the find and a great move by the coaching staff to move him from receiver to slot defensive back, and he's really hit his stride. This is his second year. I mean, he looked awesome last year. He looks even better this year. I think really has a firm understanding of the scheme, where to be, and just understands route recognition, which makes him perfect for that position. So yeah, they've got guys across the board that are difference makers at their positions, and so that's what good teams have. I mean, that's what the elite teams have. That's what the national championship teams have. They've got multiple stars across the board, and
that was without listing a handful of maybe not first round picks, but NFL draft picks on the offensive line, without touching the best tight end room probably in America. Max Bredesen and AJ Barner are both have graded out as top 10 run blocking tight ends nationally, which is their main role. You know what I mean? And Love, it's just a conveyor belt on and on it goes. And so that brings us, or me, into how I want to wrap up this A block with PJ Fleck's assessment of Michigan. Minnesota's football coach yesterday said, I think they're the best football team I've seen in 11 years of being a head coach. I've never seen a football team that deep. I think they're the best football. Copied and pasted the same quote twice. I meant to continue it, but that's the first half of the quote. I mean, he called them a boa constrictor, and just that they're disciplined, they're sound. I mean, all the praises we just heaped on them for the past 20 minutes came from someone who they care, whose opinion they value much more than ours.
Yeah, I mean, it was encouraging comments to you if you're a Michigan fan to hear that from an opposing coach about your team and what the quality of it overall. And I think again, Michigan's kind of entered that stratosphere that Ohio State occupied when I'm sure the same stuff was being said about them during the height of Urban Meyer era and the height of when were dominating the Big Ten when Michigan couldn't quite get to that level. Michigan's now at that level, and again is now probably, I mean, I don't think anybody would argue, is above Ohio State, and so they're kind of seen as the top dog in the Big Ten, and that's been the way it's been the last 2 years. I think people are trying to adjust to Michigan now. I mean, with the way that they're trying to build teams, through the offensive line and the defensive line themselves, and so they've tried to adjust the makeup of their team to match Michigan, and so I mean that's a respect level that's wasn't there maybe 3 years ago. That's started to build to the point that now people see them like they did see Ohio State during that run when Ohio State was clearly the best team in the Big Ten.
Yeah, and it wasn't needed 3 years ago, right? Michigan has earned that respect and proven it. 22 straight regular season wins since that loss in East Lansing in 2021. I mean, teams don't just do that, right? Like very few. Like Georgia, the only team in the country that can say the same.
I mean, the athleticism, though, is also a key differentiator. I mean, as far as Michigan and the rest of the conference, again, it just becomes so apparent. I mean, the Michigan, the Penn States, the Ohio States, that level of athlete across the board is far better. But I mean, it's become even more stark. These last couple of years are more apparent.
Can you just say it? Can you just talk about your conference? You're tap dancing around it. Reiner is talking about the depth of the SEC, ladies and gentlemen, and that the Big Ten's talent is concentrated at the top, which I do agree with.
Yes, I mean, in my opinion, the SEC top to bottom, you don't have as much of a difference between the bottom teams or the mid-level teams and the top teams. The Big Ten, the difference is stark. The only a select few have the type of athletes that can compete on the national level, and Michigan is one of them now. And Ohio State, of course, and Penn State, and that's it. Whereas in the SEC, I mean, the drop off in the talent isn't as substantial between, say an Ole Miss and an Alabama, or a Mississippi State and a Georgia. It's just not as dramatic.
Yeah, I mean, take Auburn, Georgia last week, right? I mean, Auburn is not that's a middling SEC team, and they pushed Georgia down to the wire. Now Georgia responded and beat the crap out of Kentucky, 51-14 or something this week. But a mid-level team pushed a top-level Big Ten team, and now you could say Maryland was pushing Ohio State yesterday. It still ended as a 20-point game. That they did push them, but no one's doing that to Michigan. That's not happening. Indiana's not doing it next week. Michigan State's not doing it the week after that. Purdue's not doing it after the bye. You know what I mean? It's just because you're right. The Minnesota was so overmatched athletically yesterday. It used to be like in the Don Brown days, like you were talking about, early Jim Harbaugh days, Michigan was just suffocating the teams it was supposed to beat, and then couldn't hang with Ohio State. Yeah, they'd split against Penn State, but Penn State has never been at that upper level that they seem to be this year. Now it's just, you're just waiting. You're waiting for 2 days.
It's true, and I think some of it. I mean, if there's one good thing that Josh Gaddis did bring was some of his perspective from the speed and space. He did bring in people like Roman Wilson and guys like that. I mean, they started to emphasize the speed across the board, and they got a better level of athlete. And then you add in the fact that they brought in Mike McDonald as a defensive coordinator, and they beefed up the inside. I mean, Michigan's defensive players up front weren't SEC caliber towards the end of the Don Brown era. I mean, you had Carlo Kemp, who was like a linebacker at the pro level playing defensive tackle. Now you've got big, huge guys like Kenneth Grant.
Mason Graham is 320.
Yeah.
Kenneth Grant is 340.
These are fire plugs in the middle that are clogging up and that's what they have in the SEC. That's what the top level teams have. They got big guys up front, stout guys that can stop the run. They've got speed across the board. Michigan's starting to look like those kind of teams, and that's why they have a chance to possibly compete for a national title here.
Michigan took its 5th defensive tackle on its rotation, Rayshon Benny, yesterday, dropped him into coverage on 3rd and 3, and he batted a ball down and forced a punt.
Mm-hmm.
So that's it. It's that type of nonsense that's going on. Just super impressive, super impressive. And I guess that's a good time to sort of cut it as we will take a break and then take a bigger look at the landscape across America, where there is chaos all around football, except in Ann Arbor. So don't go anywhere. This is Hail Yes. All right, Reiner, another busy week. Week 6 now in the books of college football. We had the Red River rivalry. We had the worst coaching blunder. I'm going to do my best to not get worked up. I really am. and I couldn't care less about Miami and Georgia Tech, but it gets me fired up just thinking about it. So let's talk about it. What stood out to you? Of course, in the lens of Michigan, what was your takeaway from yesterday?
Well, I thought the Oklahoma beating Texas was interesting. Again, I think it's confirmation that that program has shifted away from the Lincoln Riley era to Brent Venables. They were able to kind of create some turnover, some issues for Texas, and gut out that victory. I mean, they lost 49-0 last year. They come back in the same setting, beat Texas. So that was impressive to me, and it indicates that probably maybe a Big 12 team is going to be in that college football playoff. Whether it's OU or Texas, I'm sure they're going to probably meet in the Big 12 championship game and settle it in Dallas in a different, or Arlington, I should say. This game was in Dallas. This other game will be in Arlington, so it'll be in the same vicinity. But essentially, yeah, I think that game indicated that there's probably going to be a representative from the Big 12 in the college football playoff.
Right. One at the Cotton Bowl, one at Jerry World.
Yeah.
But I'm not – I need my pencil. I want to Lee Corso you. Not so fast, my friend. I'm just not sure that locks a Big 12 team into the college football playoff, because let's say they do have that rematch, right? And then let's say Texas gets the better end of it. They're both 12-1. Let's also say, for argument's sake, that Georgia wins the SEC and keeps its spot. Florida State wins the ACC and keeps its spot. That's 2 spots, right?
Mm-hmm.
The Big Ten winner is getting a spot, no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
So that's 3. Which of those teams has, say it's 1 loss Michigan or 1 loss Ohio State or 1 loss Penn State that does not get in, and their only loss is at Big Ten champion, whoever it is, on the road. Does that team, who gets the nod?
But one of them is going to be the conference champion. So I would think that whoever's the conference champion is probably going to get it. And then you have the Pac-12. I think this is such a wide open year that's going to be hard for any conference to get 2 representatives. Yeah. Now that may end up being the case, but this game showed that there's probably going to be somebody from the Big 12, assuming that they can obviously finish out their schedule without suffering any kind of upset. But that assumption I don't know if I can make in any way, shape, or form in this college football season. There's a lot more parity. There's a lot more parity.
It's October 8th, so we got a little bit of time.
Yeah.
And I don't buy anyone in the Big 12. You know what I mean? TCU, and I'm not just saying as a conference, I'm not throwing a blanket over it, but what I mean, and I'm not saying I don't buy Texas, I mean the path, because the only chance, what I mean is a Big 12 team, the only Big 12 team I see getting in from now on for the rest has to win out. I think Oklahoma has to win out. I don't think Oklahoma can lose any game and make it. And Texas would obviously have to win out. So I don't know. I don't know that yesterday changed anything.
Right, but if Texas wins out, they beat Alabama, and they would have beat OU. If you're assuming they're going to win the Big 12, that's a strong resume, And so, right, and they're a name brand, and that's why I think that they have both of those. OU's been favored by the committee before. They've gotten in, and so they've got a track record in the college football playoff. I think that factors into it when the committee's talking about teams that are now they've had some bad losses too, because they were coached by Riley. I think with Venables that they're a little bit more capable of competing in the college football playoff because they actually have a defense, and so I think they're going to be looked at favorably by the committee. I think Texas is also, they would love to have Texas in there again because of the whole Texas is back narrative. And you have the idea that it is a top level program. They used to have their own, network.
The Longhorn Network, right?
Yeah,
but Reiner, what I'm saying is it did not matter who won that game.
Right.
It did not matter because the same was going to be true in reverse. If Texas won the game And if Oklahoma wins out, then they can get a rematch with Texas and what have you. And then if you know what I mean? It was two undefeated teams who had the inside track. And I guess what you can say is Texas was the team that was on top, right? So they will separate themselves. Now you got two teams hanging around the upper level instead of one who is at that top level.
Sure.
I get that.
I think it just adds another team into the mix that you have to consider there. So and it also again gives
it also diminishes the possible strength of your top competition.
Maybe if your top competition is assumed to be Texas, so we don't know that yet. So I mean, maybe OU is the better team, and that'll be proven out over the course of the year. But I do think that there's probably, I mean, it seems to indicate that there's a good chance that a Big 12 team may find its way into the CFP.
Yeah, and it's certainly a good chance. And I mean, God, it's going to be. It feels like every year. It's always sorted itself out by the end, right? It's always gotten down to the four. Man, has there ever felt like a time where it feels more like this one's not going to get sorted out? You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Yeah, it will. It will. Week by week by week. It's going to get, the picture will clear. It will be less cloudy. But it just feels like there's going to be 4, 5, 6 might all be he said, she said, pointing and using different metrics and measures.
Michigan may hope that it's not a 2007 in some ways, because we all know what happened after 2007 for Michigan. They hired Rich Rod, who lost shockingly to Pitt that year, and that led to the dark days of Michigan. So I bet they don't want a rehash of 2007. So
West Virginia was number 2, right, in that backyard brawl, and they just had to beat unranked Pitt to go to the national championship.
Right. So if you're a Michigan, you probably don't want to have that, just from the historical context of what 2007 ultimately meant to the program.
That feels fair. But if you're Michigan, what you do want is smart coaches like Jim Harbaugh, and what you don't want are dumb coaches like Mario Cristobal. And we must move on because I mean, if you're talking about eliminating teams, right, from the possibility of the CFP, Miami was one of those teams. I mean, they would have had to run the table pretty much in the ACC, but against Florida State, I don't have their exact schedule, but against Florida State, against Clemson, against Duke, I mean, there were teams or chances. Louisville, I mean, there's chances for good wins, right? Mario Cristobal should not be allowed back in South Beach. I know you differ from this. For those who missed it, the Hurricanes, all they had the ball on Georgia Tech side of the field, 25, with 40 seconds left. Georgia Tech had no timeouts. Miami snaps the ball. All they need to do is take a knee. And there's literally nothing that can happen except the clock run up. Inexplicably, Miami runs the ball, hands it off, fumbles on what should have been the final snap of the game. Georgia Tech recovers, hits some ridiculous 35-yard shot downfield to get near midfield. Then with 10 seconds left, quarterback rolls right, throws another Hail Mary. And maybe the worst part, Reiner.
Well, it really wasn't a Hail Mary. It wasn't really a Hail Mary.
It's not even a Hail Mary.
It was like a post corner or like a post route, actually. Right. If I'm thinking about it correctly, and he's going uncovered.
I'm using the phrase Hail Mary, they are just throwing it deep at some last shot. But it's not a Hail Mary where all the defenders are lined up along the goal line, and there's a bunch of receivers waiting for a jump ball. The receiver catches it in stride in the play of field and runs into the end zone. Reiner, hyperbole is used a lot in sports. I think that might be literally the worst loss I've ever seen in sports, bar none.
It is a baffling loss, a terrible indictment on Mario Cristobal. Again, given the fact that even before the game, Georgia Tech lost to Bowling Green, the same Bowling, just the week before. So this is not a prime Georgia Tech team, and again, you had the win in hand. All you had to do was kneel the ball. But then to allow also these completions and allow them to go down the field in such quick fashion with like bizarre defense that you called. I mean, it was a confluence of bad coaching errors and pretty unforgivable. However, I mean, you can't just get rid of the guy. They were ranked, and if they just did that one thing, they would be 5-0 right now. So
don't you bring your logic into this? Don't you bring your logic into this?
Clearly they're doing something right. Yeah, clearly they're doing something right. But and the fact that he's an alum of that institution makes it less likely that they're going to drop the hammer on him. But it is pretty unforgivable. I mean, it's just idiotic what they did. I don't know what they were thinking, and I can't even imagine what the discussions are like in the coaching meetings this morning as they're reviewing this game. And it's got to be awful.
Like I couldn't imagine. I could not imagine the things I would write. I would just. I mean, and maybe why I'm really, really struggling with it is because it's bad enough to be a one-off offense, and it's horrific, unforgivable, inexcusable. Any word you want to make. Mario Cristobal has done this before. At Oregon in 2018, the Ducks were beating Stanford 31-28 with 51 seconds to play. Stanford did have a timeout, but instead of taking a knee and then Stanford calling a timeout, then taking a knee on third down, if you do the math, maybe you have to snap a fourth down play with a couple seconds left. Of course, people who are listening to this podcast know what can go wrong when you snap a final punt in the final seconds of a game. However, it was, I mean, all but, I mean, you could have, I mean, they wouldn't have needed to punt because they could have just run backwards, right? They were still up by 3. If you snap it and run backwards out of your end zone, it's a safety and you give up 2 points and you win. It was another example where all he needed to do was sit on the damn ball and you win. To not lose one game like this, but to do it a second time, and the fact he did not learn his lesson, that is the fireable offense to me. I mean, like I could have done it just for this one, but the fact you've done this before is just, how could I possibly trust you in any situation that matters?
I mean, you make a good point. Obviously, the circumstances were slightly different. This one was particularly egregious, obviously, because of, again, they literally just had to kneel on the ball and the game's over. And you're not leaving any doubts whatsoever. You're not leaving the possibility that your defense is going to forget to play defense for, in the final, X amount of seconds and allow them to go back practically the length of the field in that time with very little resistance. I mean, surely that's probably not going to happen usually in most cases either. And yet they allowed that to happen. Again, it all could have been avoided if they just kneeled the football. And it's, again, he'll never live it down. It'll trail him wherever he goes. And I mean, this will probably be his last job. Again, I can't imagine another team is going to want to hire him necessarily, unless, again, he is able to raise Miami back to that national championship level. Although now, again, there's going to be serious doubts about that. And the one thing I will say is that the players did seem like, at least one of the reactions of the players seemed to indicate, like, what are we doing, kind of on the sideline. And so that does reduce the confidence level of the players and the coaching staff.
When he was crying, the viral video of the player crying, saying, what is happening?
Right. Yeah.
And you want to hear their schedule, Reiner? Mm-hmm. They go to North Carolina next week. Then they host Clemson. And then they still got Florida State and Louisville.
Yep. I mean,
this could be the way this could be the wheels falling off.
Yeah, sure.
It's a galvanizing point, though, or galvanizing moment, right? Like, which way are we going to go?
Right, exactly, and it could be.
I don't trust in Cristobal to be the leader to bring him up.
Well, I don't know about Cristobal. I do think that it shakes the players' confidence in the coaching staff that they are making the right calls and that they should have invest that kind of faith in them, because in this case they basically betrayed them with their stupidity and not kneeling the ball. And so it's been it's again a decision that won't be lived down by Mario Cristobal. It's going to trail him the rest of the time. It's going to basically cast a pall over this entire season for Miami, regardless of what happens from here on out. It's again a huge blunder.
It will. And speaking of teams that are going to lose 4 football games this year, USC would like to enter the chat. I mean, falling down 17-0 at home to Arizona, surviving in triple overtime. Yet again, why an underdog cannot go for 2 in overtime when you're going to need to run a 2-point conversion no matter what is beyond me. Beyond me, Reiner. I hate that football guys are football guys. You know what I mean? Because a lot of them, it's why you appreciate a Mike McDonald, or Mike McDonald, like the Dolphins coach, not Michigan's old. I mean, although I never met him, I'm sure he's a good football mind too. Or a Jim Harbaugh. Like these people who aren't just gonna just brain fart and just not know what they're doing. And I'm not saying that's what Mike McDaniel. Thank you, Andrew, our producer, saving me in the chat. The Dolphins coach, his name is Mike McDaniel, not Mike McDonald. Thank you. But in any event, I've been trying, and I think you said you're on board now on the USC is a fraud train, because it's just they're no good. I can't believe they escaped again, and the game next week has certainly lost some juice at Notre Dame. They were both top 10 this week, now both coming off losses. Or actually, I guess Notre Dame or USC did not lose, but both coming off not great performances. And then, they're going to have to go to Notre Dame. Then they have to play Utah. And then they do get a reprieve with Cal, but they get Washington, Oregon, and UCLA after. And so, what did you think of what they did against Arizona? Because Caleb Williams is tremendous, but that's not enough.
No, again, it goes back. They said that they were going to fix the defense. It was going to get better, and it just really hasn't shown it. Could be the Alex Grinch is continued to be a liability for them, and the entire defense is a liability. You can't win without defense. Even in this age of offense in college football, you still need a competent defense. It's part of the reason why, again, like some of these elite teams have fallen off a little bit. Including Clemson and Alabama. They're not as dominant because they don't have as good defense as they did in those periods of time when they were, going to the college football playoff championship game annually. And so defense still is so important. And look at Georgia. The last couple of years, they've had a elite level defense and they're the national champions. And so you can't win this way. Again, Lincoln Riley, when he had the OU teams, they were getting blown out in the CFP. I don't see USC as a real contender, because they can't be this one-dimensional or one-sided, I should say. They have a really good offense, but they just can't stop anybody.
Just put them against Michigan in your mind, right? They're going to score. They're going to score. Right? Michigan will struggle to stop them from scoring.
Sure.
Michigan will never not score. And eventually, Michigan will make the adjustments to slow them a little bit and not just give up touchdowns and stop them. That's not going to happen the other way. They're just incapable. You have receivers running open. You have, running backs just gallivanting through arm tackles. It's just, I don't even know what system they run. But it's horrendous. It's pretty offensive. You were going to say?
No, I just think, again, it's a huge flaw in their whole team concept. You can't have such a bad portion of your team and it being half your team. It's defense optional at USC, and that's not good.
Riley's loyalty to Alex Grinch.
Will be his undoing. Will be his undoing. As it relates to the national title discussion. Again, they if you matched Lincoln Riley with, if you had a Venables style defensive coordinator, I mean, they probably would be very much in the running for a national title. And I just think even in this day and age with high-powered offenses, if you can match a really good defense with that, I mean, you're going to put yourself in position. And again, Georgia doesn't have this kind of a super dynamic offense. They have a good, efficient offense, but they've had an elite defense, and they've been the national champions the last 2 years and have a good shot at winning it the third straight year.
I mean, defense wins championships is the saying, right? They don't say offense wins championships.
Right.
And just to put a bow on the USC thought, the argument was that nobody in the Big 12 plays defense. It's tough to recruit Norman, but we can do anything in LA, right? And so once Lincoln goes to USC, I mean, that was the idea of why you bring a struggling Alex Grinch along for the ride. And it's just been more of the same. And so the last team I want to think about, and pretty quickly, because we got to get going, Ohio State, who, if you just look at a box score, 37-17, got a push against the spread. But for anybody who saw, it was anything but for the first three quarters. Maryland was up 10-0 early. It should have been at worst 13-0, maybe as much as 21. What did you make of Ohio State and I guess, and then when you look at Notre Dame, right? You think of Ryan Day and his thought about the tough team and going on the road and beating Notre Dame. Now that was a big win. I don't want to just take away from it, but Notre Dame just lost by a couple scores to Louisville. Right? I mean, they've lost twice. They've lost twice now, and they barely beat Duke. They could have 3 losses. So, you don't want to transitive property college football too much, because eventually Old Dominion is the national champion. But when there are signs that Ohio State, again, this Ohio State is not the Ohio State.
Yeah, I mean, again, they were missing Travion Henderson, and I think McCord showed that he can play at a top level. I mean, this was, I think, his best performance, and he seems to be building some momentum. So that was the good aspect. But this team does not seem like the teams that were towards the end of the Urban Meyer era, the beginning of the Ryan Day era, that are just wiping teams off the field and not having any issue whatsoever. So I don't think they're quite as dominant as those teams. And again, I mean, it's played out these last couple of weeks. I mean, they've been in some dogfights with Notre Dame and now Maryland. And I don't think either Notre Dame or Maryland are, great teams by any means. So I think it's going to be nip and tuck all the way for Ohio State, especially when they play good competition. That Penn State game is going to be a real bellwether game for them. I mean, it really is. I mean, who knows what happens there? I mean, maybe Ohio State can conjure up something, and maybe they're holding stuff back and or just haven't reached that level. But I don't think they've hit their stride yet. And if they have, they're in for a rude awakening.
There you go. I was going to say they better hope this is not their stride, because this looks more like a saunter than a stride or a gallop. 2 weeks, 13 days now, when Ohio State hosts Penn State in Columbus on October 21st. In between there, Reiner, probably, it's going to be gray. It's probably going to rain. A little trip to West Lafayette. I mean, I have seen Iowa and Purdue. No teams knock off Ohio State, I swear, more than those two. Now, Purdue might be such booty cheeks that they might not be able to, right? They are they're just awful. However, little trap game. I think that's got trap game written all over it. I
don't know if it's a trap game, because one, everybody's aware of Purdue and their ability to sometimes
the spoiler makers.
And then the other idea is that Ohio State really hasn't hit its stride again. So why would they even overlook anybody at this point? I mean, they just left this game probably thinking they they're somewhat fortunate, just given how they were finally able to find something to be able to kind of, and usually it's the Maryland that ends up shooting itself in the foot, and it's always the case. Yeah, so they can't ever get out of their own way, even when it looks like they have a shot. So they end up falling in the end, and that's what happened. And so, I don't think Ohio State feels as confident or cocky enough to overlook Purdue, given how they've had some struggles these last couple games. I mean, not everything has been even close to perfect.
Yeah, and if you're not overlooking this Purdue team that's already lost to Syracuse, that just lost to an anemic Iowa team, has a third loss, I believe, as well. And that, I'm not saying you should just overlook everyone, because we know what Michigan players and coaches would be telling us: the next game, be where your feet are, blah blah blah. But we know what they'd actually be really thinking about is the big one. If Ohio State is not in a position in its program or in its how it's playing to really be focusing on Penn State, knowing it's going to take care of business against Purdue, that tells me everything I need to know about where things are at the halfway point of the season. And that's where we are. And Reiner, I feel we're hitting our stride at the halfway point of the season, still undefeated, 6-0, baby. And we're gonna keep it rolling. Maybe we took a little loss this week because we did promise. I promised to, or said that we would get into basketball on this episode. There was no time. There was much too much to talk about football wise. I am still in Minneapolis right now, and I will be until Tuesday because it is Big Ten Media Days for basketball. And so Michigan is actually sending Sadie Washington. So Juwan Howard, head coach, had heart surgery. He will not be there. Phil Martelli, we were told, acting head coach, would be, evidently not. Got an email. Third time's the charm, Sadie Washington. So I'm not sure how much we will be able to glean, but I will ask whatever we can. Olivia Kumwa, the transfer from Tennessee, is coming. Namari Burnett, the transfer from Alabama, and Jace Howard, who is now going to be a captain for the second year in a row. It appears will accompany the team as well. So we're gonna talk basketball off the top of the next show, I believe, unless something crazy happens, and then we'll get into Michigan, Indiana before we look at the picks. So that was just a little look ahead. Reiner, are you fully prepped for basketball season?
I'm not. I don't even know what basketball is.
All right. Well, you have 48 to 72 hours to get fully ready. I'm also an AP voter for basketball. I believe my vote is due this week. It's really tough to act like I've turned the basketball mind on right now. I mean, it's just it's hard. It's hard, and it's especially hard when the team we are covering is number 2 in the nation, and the basketball team is looking like it won't be number 2 in the nation. You could say.
Not even close. Yeah.
No. I don't think so. So don't worry. We're going to keep it football focused. But Michigan, there are not 10 teams who have had a better basketball program the past 10 years than Michigan. And it's upsetting or not upsetting, it's the wrong word. It's too bad that it looks like that's not the trajectory this season will be on. However, you never know. I think this defense will be markedly improved. And there are sometimes... there is a thing called addition by subtraction. There may be a little bit of that going on too. So we'll get into all of it. There's lots of storylines. But before we go, many thanks to all the people who do it once again. Editor-in-Chief Nicole Avery-Nichols, Executive Editor Anjanette Delgado, Sports Editor Kirkland Crawford, Audio Engineer Robin Chan, and Sports Editor and our show's producer Andrew Burkle. For Reiner, I'm Tony. Enjoy your week.